Welcome, everyone. And come join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, welcome to the regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Town of Brunswick, October 17th, 2022. We'll begin by reviewing the draft minutes of our previous meeting held on September 19th, 2022. I read them and did not see a need to make any corrections, deletions, or additions, so I offer a motion to approve the draft minutes with a member second. Second. Thank you, Patricia. All in favor?
Aye.
Approved without amendment. We'll review tonight's agenda. It's posted on the town website. Number one is Fung area variance. For that, we will not open the public hearing at this meeting. The Brunswick zoning law requires the ZBA public hearing notices for variances to be published in the official newspaper at least 10 days before the hearing. The town's official newspaper is the Eastwick Press. Upon review of the October 7th edition of the Eastwick Press, a zoning board of appeals public hearing notice was not published in that particular edition. So due to this, tonight's public hearing cannot go forward and we will need to renotice. I'd like to know from the zoning board members how you'd like to handle this. I see two options. One would be to renotice the public hearing for next month's regularly scheduled meeting. That would be November 21st. Or we could hold a special meeting to complete the public hearing. And I guess we would need the advisement of our attorney in Hillcrest about the publication dates and when you could kind of get in a special meeting if you were to do that. If you were to choose that.
Yep. So on this floor in general, Ann is correct. The zoning law does require public hearing notice to be posted and published at least 10 days prior to the public hearing date. The official newspaper is the Eastwick Press. It is a weekly, and the publication date is every Friday. We provide the notices earlier in the week. Just so the record's clear on this one, that was done. And in point of fact, we received an email confirmation that it was received and would be published. And unfortunately, the newspaper didn't make it into the newspaper. So the publication error. That could be repeated. Presumably, this was the first time that it came up. So in terms of timing, we do need a Friday edition that would then be at least 10 days prior to the public hearing date. If it's the regular November meeting, we'll send and publish accordingly, but if you consider a special meeting date, just keep those time.
John, do you have your calendar out?
I was going to say, if you noticed on the 28th, you'd be able to have the meeting on Monday, the 7th. Is it 10 business days, Andy, or is it
It's 10 days.
10 days?
The code just indicates
From-
10 days.
So from Friday, the 28th, if it was out in that edition, you would have 10 days until November 7th. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Let me confirm.
And while Andy's doing that, if you want to kind of weigh in on how you feel
21st is
about
another option too.
wait
But
until the
it's
regular
more,
scheduled meeting in November, or do you
I
feel
was
like
doing
this
worst
is
case scenario,
necessary
yeah.
that we should schedule something?
Normally, I'm against special meetings, but in this case, the applicant's being punished for something he didn't do. And I think we should bend over backwards to accommodate him.
You guys have another thought on that matter?
It is the code does say it, just 10 days.
If you got, if you were able to get the notice out the 21st, all the better. Because then you would have 17 days. but
The
it's.
21st would be this Friday.
Right, yeah, it's
Right, so-
not wanting to put pressure, on.
I mean, they would have to be notified tomorrow.
What's the last publication deadline is Tuesdays to get it in for Friday?
I would assume so, I don't
It,
know.
it's very tight. They will take it Wednesday morning, but preferring earlier. I believe they actually go to print on Wednesday.
I mean, if we tried to do that and did the 8th with a little bit of leeway, would that work? Or, now it's election day, actually. If we were gonna do
Well,
that,
and-
or what other?
Seventh.
that would be the
Usually
7th, right?
there's a court on Tuesday as well.
So we give money.
So we can get Monday the 7th,
That's why I picked the 7th.
Why don't we just pick the seventh and?
try to get it,
If
because
you get it in,
either
it's
way,
either way,
if it
it's
slips
gonna
up
be
to the 21st, it's still 10 days. from
Get it in for the
28th, right?
28th, yeah. Almost giving the paper two options if you have the ability to notice.
Exactly, 10 days.
What's that date for?
That's strictly, I'm first of all in agreement with John, I mean, it's, it's not their fault. So as far as members to be here, is there anything that would be needed for like quorum? There is a possibility that we're gonna make it
That's
that
my
Monday.
question, right. So it would be a public hearing. We could act and deliberate and act at that meeting where we would.
Quorum will be required even though it's a public hearing. Yeah, quorum to conduct any business.
And then we'll be at 6.
I mean, I'm available,
Yeah, I'm available
John's
as well.
available, I'm available, John's
I'm always
available.
available.
So we would have a quorum if.
Okay. Yeah,
And 6 would be the time.
I'm 75% sure I can make it that way.
Okay.
I just have to make a slight change.
And this would be just for fun, based on the publication.
Can I
But
make
if
make a suggestion that if somehow it doesn't get published again, that we publish it for the next regular meeting? If we can't have it at the special meeting, we publish it to have it on a regular
I
meeting?
think that will cause confusion among the public as to what meeting to attend. But I wouldn't anticipate another publication error.
I would say they would, hopefully they
Sounds like
would
we have
take
a week of
special
leeway
care
just in
of
case,
Yeah.
because it could always be put in for the 28th. And that would still give us 10 days. So even if there is a little snafu, if we have a,
So let's go for November 7th at 6.
Someone is going to come from the public. And they'll have to come to the special meeting and.
There was actually a woman here.
Responses
tonight, that was gonna,
Right, that's
I
right.
don't know what her
anyway.
response was gonna be, but she asked me when we came out about the public hearings for Hummuston Act, so.
Right. So then Chuck, would you be able to notify the applicants upon that?
I will do that. Yep.
Thank
Do we want to confirm that it goes through?
No, we'll send that out. I think going forward, we're going to simply act as if the official newspaper will duly publish. And if it comes up again, we'll deal with it.
It's
Sounds
the
good.
first time it's ever happened since I've been on the board.
All right, fair enough. And then to continue, 2, 3, and 4 at Paulson Development, area variance, followed by Atlas Renewables North Troy Solar, area variance, and lastly, Atlas Renewables Brunswick and Sigley Solar, use variances. So we'll move on to Paulson Development. Continue that. Hi, how are you?
Good evening, Eric Green with BBL Construction Services for the Paulson Development Project at 12 Chestnut Avenue. We are looking for, I suppose we are looking for a determination on the area variance that's been submitted. The last time we met, it was the determination was postponed pending the early October planning board meeting, where we did, where the planning board did approve the secret. So we are now back looking for the determination on the area variance, which would then, with that approval, we are then going to seek approval with planning board. So we were hoping we could, if there were any questions about the facade of the building or materials, I can answer those. But I guess that's our current status.
So the zoning board is in receipt of the response to the traffic study, the assessment that was done September 19th. Do you just want to kind of summarize what you have passed out to the zoning board members, please?
Well, the traffic study, basically indicates it will increase traffic through that area to any significance. No mitigation is necessary for the current street and intersection. That's pretty much the gist of the traffic study.
Okay, that's a both question, and then I asked you about the discussion that you had at the planning board regarding the sidewalks. But the first, in regards to the banked parking, Angie, maybe this is for you too. So in the minutes, it spoke about that the banked parking will remain green space unless it is needed in the future. Would the applicant have to return to the board to go through any sort of process? No. They can go ahead and give a determination that they need more parking, or they build it out.
That's the essence of the showing the banked parking area in the site plan.
Yeah.
We'll deal with that in the planning board. Should be some discussion or condition concerning the banked parking, but no, they would not return. It's already been reviewed.
And then if you could kind of go over your discussion that you had with the planning board in regards to the sidewalks. There's something about maybe having a discussion with Rensselaer County regarding the sidewalks.
So I think the sidewalk discussion is still pending with the planning board.
Mhm.
We're really just looking for an area variance on the side, the height of the building,
Right.
this section of the building right here. I think I'd really just like to focus on that part of as that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for a use variance on the site. It's approved for the medical office that we're looking for.
Sure, so I guess the relevancy of my question would be, in allowing a building like this in the site that you're proposing, would it require a means of connectivity for the pedestrians and residents to use Route 7 to access the building that's being proposed? So I believe that there is some relevancy to the zoning board's review of the area variance for the height relief in regards to how the building will be used, how the building will have impact on that community.
Okay.
Yeah, I think discussing the sidewalks is appropriate here.
Sure, we would be more than happy to add the sidewalk to connect it to this property to Route 7, Route 6th Street, if the planning board and zoning board ask for that to be done.
Yeah.
The use, the patients that will be frequenting the building generally aren't taking mass transit. They're getting dropped off. They're not even driving themselves. Especially for the first floor, which is the endoscopy center, and then for 3/4 of the second floor, where it's a orthopedic clinic. And then the third tenant, which they're looking at, is an eye doctor. So those folks probably may or may not be using mass transit, purely based on where they're coming from. Employees would be the group of people that would be using mass transit, and if the sidewalk is determined that it's required and would make sense for the building, we would put it.
Right. I appreciate your answers. I appreciate that right now, these are the tenants who are using this, who are addressing the needs of patients with mobility issues. But in the future, this beautiful building, and it is a beautiful building, the developer has done a wonderful job designing it, with its higher roof, may hold other tenants who,
Sure.
who could, use the transportation and the public transportation in the seven, so. And kind of just to speak to the connectivity of that area, where it has sewer and city water, it has the potential to be built out, on either side of your neighbors, to give up their little residential area and go more commercial. So I appreciate the traffic study where it doesn't say there will be any significant increase on McChesney Ave. And the idea of having, it was brought up by, I believe, the public hearing, maybe an exit in one way and an exit, or an entrance in one way and exit out another way. Where this site may not be feasible for the amount of rock and the topography that this building is going to go in, but I think that's a discussion that the planning boards and the zoning boards need to have kind of going forward in seeing this area as a potential for more commercial development. So then just to review, the area variance for height relief is in front of the board. We've had a public hearing, the applicant addressed the comments of the public hearing. And we have the time now to further discussion, deliberate on the merits of this before acting.
Right, and if I could also note, we'll confirm on the record that seeker has been completed by the planning board serving as lead agency before they can review. This was referred to Rensselaer County, and that response is in the record, does not conflict with county plans, and local consideration shall prevail. And I'll also confirm on the record that on the issue of the sidewalks, there was a response by the applicant that one option that is proposed is that the projected cost of sidewalk installation be paid by the applicant into an escrow account at the town to be used for sidewalk installation in the future in the event the town does address the overall pedestrian access and sidewalk system along McChesney. So there'll be funds available for this portion, this segment in front of this particular commercial site. It is not clear whether there's a final determination of pedestrian access on the line of McChesney, but to address that, there may be escrow accounts.
Who would define that? Who would define when it's time to install?
The town. So
The town board or?
likely the town board. All of this was anticipated to be discussed in the event the board acts tonight to approve the area variance at the planning board with an appropriate condition attached to any action on the site plan to address the sidewalk issue. The applicant has estimated the cost for sidewalk installation and has said that that amount would be paid into the town to be used for future sidewalk installation. Generally, that's a town board determination. And in this case, we need to coordinate with the county, as that's a county highway along that stretch.
So I have a question about that. So when you talk about the sidewalks for the site, does that include the entire length of McChesney Avenue or only to the entrance?
It's that part along the
Yeah, I
frontage
don't have the,
of
civil
this
plan.
particular commercial site.
So the
on
entire
McChesney,
frontage on McChesney Avenue
That's
for the
correct.
site? Okay.
which would be, if you will, then a portion of the sidewalk segment. There's another obviously third-party owner between this site and this road.
There's the site.
Would need to
Your
be
problem is now you've got to go on Nyquist property, so you get the road killed.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm just saying, look at the sidewalks stop here at the entrance, and then you have all this and something else comes down and they do a sidewalk and it didn't. Right. Because eventually Shaver's gonna go.
it's B15 way the heck down here.
Mm.
You know,
So there all has the
So-
potential.
it's all commercial.
Any other questions for the applicant and the members? Thank you. Take a seat. You're great. Okay, so if the select board members are prepared to incorporate the act, we'll note that this is a type 1 action on the seeker and that it's already been determined by the county court as a regulation.
I can certainly confirm that the negative declaration was adopted. As I sit here, I can't recall if it was type 1 or unlisted. But we'll confirm.
Yeah. Do I need to help you with that?
No, that won't
Okay.
answer the question.
Unlisted, how about that?
That will help. So it wasn't that, that's what I thought it would be
Okay,
for a
sure.
project of this size. So an unlisted action in seeker has been completed through the adoption of the declaration.
What is it, an unlisted action?
Correct.
Now, the type one is an unlisted.
Right, so again, as a quick reminder for the board, under seeker, you first classify the action, and it can be classified either as a type 1, or it could be a type 2 action, and everything that doesn't fit into the type 1 or type 2 is an unlisted action. Type 1 actions are those under the regulations that are deemed to be more likely to have a significant adverse environmental impact due to their size or nature. Type 2 are exempt from any further seeker review determined by the state not to have a significant adverse impact. And everything else in between then is still subject to seeker review, but is listed as unlisted. This was an unlisted action, and the planning board reviewed the parts 2 and 3 of the full EAF and adopted the negative declaration. Yeah.
All right, so we'll review our standards. We're asked to determine whether or not the result in granting this area variance will result in any undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood.
Well, I think it's very attractive building. I cannot feel that would have unusual. This would be a detriment to the nearby properties.
And another way to look at this, to maybe to help answer this, so we're to consider whether there's a dimensional alteration that's being proposed, and that is the 6-foot 36-foot height as required for 30-foot height, is it seriously out of place in the neighborhood? So that 6 feet with that design, does it make it seriously out of place in the neighborhood? And I think your comment again falls under that nicely, that it's well designed. Then we're asked to explain why the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. I think again, the applicant has explored other options on, the purpose of the roof is to hide some of the air conditioning units and kind of has a pitch for that reason. We try to look at other places, locations on the building, sign the building where they can be placed, but that seems to be the best place for them. So it's kind of hiding that equipment. And we're asked to explain, describe whether the requested area variance is substantial. Again, just to restate it, what we required is 30-foot height, what is being proposed is 36.
I don't think it's substantial, it's only a minimal percentage if you take into consideration the rest of the size of the building.
The board's asked to explain how the proposed area variance will not have an adverse effect on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. In this, we could look at such factors as traffic, drainage, dust, noise, odor, impact on emergency services, among others. And I think, of course, that the proposal and the build out of this building will have an impact on all of these, but not a detrimental or adverse effect. And we're asked to explain whether the difficulty is self-created, noting that the consideration is relevant, but shall not necessarily include the granting of the area variance.
It is self-created because they want to, they want to hide the equipment, keep that out of being perspective when you get to the building, which I think is a great idea. If they're going to have that additional 6 feet, you would see it. And it wouldn't be as aesthetic. So, yeah, self-inflicted, but I think it's for a good reason.
Yeah, I think that's good. So if there's no further deliberation, we can consider the balance between the benefit to the applicant as we advance any detriment to the community at large or the neighborhood in particular, whether to grant, to request a variance, deny or grant with conditions. We did speak about the sidewalk escrow. Mentioned it was I like that idea, it's a very good idea. I kind of would like the zoning board to recommend to the planning board to continue with that thought. The idea of installation, the cost of that we put into an escrow for future development. That's how that really goes.
Just a question, could we add to that the point that Ann brought up, that if the use of the building changes, would that trigger the sidewalk debate?
Can I give a micro on
Yeah.
it? Which is, the sidewalk is the sidewalk, meaning the sidewalk's gonna be installed for whether it's a particular medical tenant or it's the same sidewalk regardless of the tenant. The issue of the sidewalk is its placement, its connection to Hoosick Road, and then I think the goal was ultimately up and down Chestnut. So the key is establishing the resources for sidewalk construction and ultimately your coordination with the town, and let that be a town issue, and the town will issue actual installation. Really, as a site plan conditions to escrow that money so that it's in place to construct it. It would not be, at that point, an applicant requirement to construct. The requirement is funding the escrow. In that case, the town would then be in a position to hire a contractor to construct.
I was just thinking, I didn't want it to fall through the cracks and then the town forget about if it's somebody, at some point, the sidewalks needed, that they can do it. I'm probably wrong, don't get me wrong.
No. Obviously, the town does need to account for the escrows that are established for each of these projects, so that will be a town responsibility. And recall, part of the general development in that area, meaning McChesney and McChesney Avenue Extension, was not necessarily a sidewalk installation on McChesney Avenue Extension and McChesney around the apartments, but the construction of an extended shoulder and pavement. This was a county recommendation. They didn't want the requirement of curbs and sidewalks to be maintained, but having an extended paved shoulder that would allow for safe pedestrian walking. And that they could also maintain in the winter by putting down a wing on the plow and just plowing it off, rather than having a separate sidewalk. So how they get constructed and where they get constructed still to be determined. The concept of the escrow for future construction was raised, as we don't know yet what that full sidewalk or pedestrian access plan would be, rather than have a project held up until that's determined. The escrow concept was raised, that's all. And I don't think the town will, once that, if that escrow is established, won't forget about that.
So I don't see a need for a condition, by the zoning board.
It's simply subject to action on the site plan by the planning board. And I do like the concept of the recommendation of the zoning board to the planning board that they require the sidewalk escrow.
So noting that, would a member make a motion to grant, deny, or just without condition?
I'll make a motion that we grant the area variance allowing the additional 6 feet in height.
Thank you. And second,
One second.
thanks, John. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, motion carried. Thank you very much, nice working with you. Good luck with your project. All right, so we have Atlas Renewables North Troy Solar seeking area variance.
evening. Just a reminder of North Troy, which is the type of area variance that today we are asking for, if possible, final determination. Just a quick reminder for the board. Initially, this solar farm, North Troy, was to be located on the former municipality incinerator. Again, I need to appreciate the support from the town. The problem here was that the DEC request to remove all the potential dirtiness, and that supposed economic hit on the project that wasn't possible to move forward. The international type original project was to be connected exactly here, in the same location for National Grid. We are not changing this location, and because the landowner is the same landowner of the adjacent parcel, and that adjacent parcel has a portion which is classified as industrial soil, we entered into discussions with Mr. Murphy, and Mr. Murphy was kind enough to give us a portion to accept to have a lease for approximately up to 20 acres to install this project here. There were, at that point of time, there were two potential issues in this project. One is National Grid. If National Grid will accept this change in the position of the land, we made that consultation to National Grid. They confirmed that yes, as far as we are keeping the same interconnection point, they were fine. And the second, of course, was how to cross this former municipal incinerator to connect to the same point. We entered into discussions with the DEC, and the DEC recommended us to go from the exit of this project as much possible as to the north part underground, and then cross this former municipal incinerator with 3 poles, plus then the 6 poles to interconnect with National Grid. A review of this drawing with these 9 poles are shown in this slide. So with 1, 2, and 3 poles, we'll be crossing the former municipal incinerator, and then the rest 6 poles to connect with National Grid. City Engineering conducted one survey where approximately we will be locating this middle point. We show the results to the DEC, and the DEC acknowledged the change of use, I think by February 2022. So we have checked different alternatives, but this was the most pleasant alternative for DEC, and they accepted the change of use for this crossing the municipal incinerator. The last zoning board, I think that we were waiting for the planning board to review the secret review. That happened on October 6th. We received the negative declaration on the secret review, and we are asking if possible today to have the termination of this area.
So one of the issues I have, one of the questions I have, when I do like an informal inventory of solar facilities in Rensselaer County, I don't see facilities so close to high-density housing as this proposed one is. And when I look at the site, including the land that's to be leased for the solar facility, there's, the high-density housing, entertainment by way of the Field of Horrors, and then the solar facility, and then the future of more high-density housing development south of what's there now. And it just doesn't make sense to me that a solar facility should be a part of a multi-use parcel. So from my informal inventory of solar facilities in Rensselaer County, they're generally at this size, this megawatt size, are kind of tucked away in a field surrounded by other fields, and the only residential dwelling near it or adjacent to it is usually a farm which, lease the land to the solar facility. So I have a hard time with the established high-density housing that's so close to this proposed facility. And then with the potential that once the moratorium of high-density housing is lifted in Brunswick, the potential of having more, of course, would be different because those residents would go in knowing that if the solar facility is there, that they're going to be living next to a solar facility. But the people in Brunswick Meadows, it was built out there, they moved there, they seem to like it very much. The developer has done a wonderful job with that particular development. The people who I know and have spoken to enjoy living there. So that's the obstacle that I'm having. And I just kind of wanted to put that out for discussion and to hear the opinions and thoughts of the zoning board members, and of course, if the applicant wants to address that.
Just one point, thank you very much, Mr. Moon. Just a reminder for the board, this parcel, which is 8 acres, and this is a street, it is split into 3 different zones. All this portion, and this portion is classified as industrial. This portion here is classified as residential, although the nature of the rocky geological substrate is probably making it difficult to build a large number of houses. My point is that in regards of Brunswick, this is an industrial soil. So supposedly any type of industrial activity would be permitted in this type of land. Actually, you can see that here is a kind of amusement or industrial or wherever you can see. And this is a municipal incinerator, which will always be a kind of barrier between the existing dry houses and the solar farm. I agree with you that yes, ideally those solar farms should be located not close to the populations, should be, in my view, located where first, where there is capacity. In our business, we need a connection to the grid, and second, in those parcels that otherwise the type of use will be very difficult to do. And as there is a change of use in this land, this is currently classified as industrial. So this is just a comment from our side.
Right, certainly, I appreciate that information and acknowledge that it is properly zoned for this use. And I guess to my point a little bit, that in the minutes, we're in agreement for additional tree plantings if that were to be required, instead of a barrier between the existing high-density housing and this site.
In one of the previous meetings, I recall that you said there's a possibility that you would not have to have all 9 poles.
No, correct, Mr. Brown. Actually, we have had a discussion this morning with National Grid that try to push from 6 poles. So this is 3 poles for crossing the municipality plus 6. We have insisted if it's possible to reduce to 4. National Grid position is at this moment, it's very unlikely to be less than 6. Why? It depends on the different combination of site of the project, location of the project, how strong is the substation, how strong is this feeder line. So we have requested this one, General Playground, National Grid, to reduce, if possible, to 4. They have strongly suggested to try to keep it at 6 poles.
I had a question. The poles that would be used to cross the old incinerator and to the National Grid interconnection, would they all be about 35 to 45? Would they-
Can we confirm the spec for the pole? Is it metal or wood? Wood.
Okay, going back to that idea about maintaining the screening or that the tree buffer, also offered berms, trees, or fencing. Now, Chuck, would you be involved with, or would the planning board determine what type of screening would be best?
It's usually a combination of the planning board engineer, and myself.
Okay. Great.
That's how it's worked in the past.
Does anyone have any other questions, comments? And then the planning board is prepared to deliberate and act upon this requested area variance. We go through our standard elements. And we would begin by explaining how no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood nor detriment to nearby properties created by granting the area variance. And again, it's the number of telephone poles, utility poles.
Correct, it's the, not just the number, it's the fact that they are above ground utility poles. The zoning law currently does require the utilities to be underground, so that the requested variance here is to allow above ground utilities to the use of minor poles.
Just to note for the members, so this discussion that we're having of the factors will create a record for on the basis of our decision. So let's find out, we're going through these elements and the comments that are made for these elements.
Do you know what the other solar farms, what, I mean, because we have some other solar farms that have above ground poles. What was the maximum?
Get confirmation from Chuck, I believe it's 6. Is that
It
right?
was 6 or 7. I think Duesenberg was up there. We had quite a few of them. Yeah.
Rega having 3, is that, do you recall that? Rega having 3 utility poles?
And that was because they decided to do a ground mount switch. That the one thing I took and parked the truck next to and took a picture for all you folks to show you the size of it. That, yeah. Otherwise, all of those, instead of they just had the mechanical switching in there rather than have the gang operated air breakers, which are up on top of the, which is much safer to be up on in the air because of the amount of arc.
Well, the area is zoned industrial. And, the area where the poles would be is on the opposite side, I believe, of where the Brunswick River system. So I don't know exactly that.
We were asked to explain why benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance.
This is what National Grid is requiring them to do to make a connection. So I don't think they have any other option.
And I think it was evidenced by the meeting that they had this morning with National Grid to continue the discussions on the number of poles and tables. We're asked to describe whether the requested area variance is substantial. Now we have a total of 9 poles. 3 would be used to cross the old incinerator and 6 to make that National Grid interconnection.
Well, it is substantial, but it is what National Grid is requiring them for the distance of that distance from where the panels are to where they have to make the connection.
The board is asked to explain how the proposed area variance will not have an adverse effect on physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. Note here that the planning board at their last October 6th meeting, a negative secret determination. And then lastly, we're asked to explain whether the difficulty is self-created, noting consideration is relevant, but not necessarily will preclude the granting of area variance. She spoke to this a little bit about requirements of National Grid.
Well, it is self-created because they're building the facility, which requires the variance.
Yes. Lovely. What's kind of come up in this discussion and in previous discussions at previous meetings are conditions and whether or not the zoning board sees any conditions that they would want to attach to a decision. We spoke at length about maintaining the tree buffer to the north in regards to the development at Brunswick Meadows. We've seen all kinds of visuals of what is existing, the vegetation that's existing. And the applicant did offer to install other means of a screening such as berms, trees, and fencing. I think, of course, that every effort should be made to maintain the existing tree buffer that's there now. As far as to put that as one of our conditions.
Not sure if there should be a discussion about the section of fence that's closer to the paintball or field of horse property, about being a little bit more of a secure fence. Only because at night there are a lot of people that are out there that could wander off closer to the property and possibly enter the facility.
So when you talk about, John, more secure fencing, do you, in terms of height or material?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at Exhibit B and page 6 that they presented their plan. It's just a very low grade, looks like a chicken wire fence. I'm not sure in the area that field of horrors, if they might want to go a little more robust, like a chain link fence in that area for better security.
I believe some of that fencing that's shown in that exhibit is nature friendly to allow the fauna and the flora to kind of continue their paths through that area, but I do see a need for more security, especially this time of year. We're kind of reminded of the traffic and that part.
I'm curious as to if there was any standard that is set forth for fencing around the solar farms. I mean, there's solar farms that are going up all over the place, and particularly in New York State. So is there a standard that mitigates liability to a local township, to, you know, I mean, but I'm with John. You have to have something that is more robust, taller. With that, doesn't need to look pretty. It needs to protect, so I don't know if there's any type of standard out there that we could refer to, or we could get information on.
NEC 17, the National Electrical Code of 2017 stated that they had to have a fence around them, 6-foot fence.
And
So prior to that, and there was one other solar farm that came in prior to that, didn't have fence at all. And you can see that as you go up on 7. There's one out there that, it doesn't look like it's operational. I think it was
Up in
Monolith
Kutztown?
was the owner, and that doesn't even have a fence around it, because that was built prior to the enacting of NEC 17. But it does say 6-foot fence. As to robustness of fence, I'll have to look in the NEC code and see what it is for robustness. But there are, and we have allowed options to applicants of what style fence. For not being a voting member, I would have to agree with the shenanigans that go on at the haunted house.
Right.
It would be a good idea to boost that up. You want me to put the lights back on? Are we done with the?
You know, because if somebody wants to get in bad enough,
They will.
a 6-foot fence is not gonna hold anybody back. You know? I mean, if somebody wanna get into it, into that area.
Sure. I was talking to Liz, I remember at one of the discussions at this meeting, although I hadn't handled much of this, was a discussion about putting some screening, like some of the camouflage kind of netting between the paintball field and the fence, because you got, one of my 17-year-olds, one of the kids that goes there on occasion, kids, running around with paintball, be a great little thing to shoot at or something, who knows? So there's gonna be some sort of barrier to break up the visibility of it, and then behind that barrier will be the fence. And I agree with Chuck that under the National Electric Code, it is required to have fencing. We could, kind of like the idea of the larger section so that the small animals can go through. We could offer to put barbed wire on the top of it along that western boundary if permitted by the state and other permitting agencies. But I agree with you, if somebody wants to go with wire clippers, and I hear the same discussion with cell towers all the time. It's like, you want to go through that fence and nobody's looking, people will make a hole in the fence. So, but we can put barbed wire on it to, keep people from, if they think they're going to climb over the gene impediment. Lewis was saying there's some concern with some of the regulators about birds being killed by barbed wire. Particularly hold that as a real concern personally, but we'd be willing to offer that up, and if that's what the board wants, subject to it being allowed by like the DEC and NYSERDA and folks that would this.
I just brought it up because that was the first time, same thing, I have, one of my kids went up there for the first time and I had to drop them off, but I do notice that they were parking cars up on the hillside, very close to that,
Must have been a busy day.
to that fence line. I think it was a Saturday night.
Yeah.
So, by the drawing that I'm looking at, compared to where they have their little shed on the left, they were parking cars up on that area that to me looked like it was, now that I look at it on this map, very close to your corner of the property. That, hey, when it's dark and they want to wander off, for a little while when they're done. And
Kids or youngsters will find those.
so I'm not potentially thinking about people that just want to get in because they want to get in. I'm just talking about from this site because of who it attracts, and there are wanderers after that, and they may be wandering off to kill some time. And I think something a little more robust than a chicken wire fence might keep them out.
I don't think it's chicken wire, I think it's a 4x4.
It's
4x4.
pasture fence.
Pasture.
Yeah.
Or deer fence is what we call it.
Yeah, deer fence and
Yeah, so it's, it's a heavier chain. I mean, that's, we're not here to quibble about that level of defense. We're concerned, there's a lot, there are people there, they operate at night. During the daytime, with the prices they charge, hopefully kids are there, not wasting their time going in through the fence. But yeah, that's no problem to do, that western and southwesterly wrap and heavier chain link, and either put barbed wire on if that's what the planning board wants, if that's what you want to recommend to the planning board to consider that. So long as we can get permitted for it. I don't think your code has a problem with barbed wire. I almost think I see a lot of codes, so I apologize. There's some community around here that actually prohibits barbed wire on top of chain link fence. Maybe it's not yours. I do, worried about the cell tower I did that. I thought there was something about barbed wire on the top of the fence. I kind of thought John Birch said, hey, we're not allowed to have barbed wire. I think you said we'll take it off. But subject to not needing another fence, it's for barbed wire, or if you include that in the variance, we'd be happy to put that in there for the.
I'll have to ask Ron. I don't know. Yeah.
Chuck, do you remember, am I thinking this is the wrong town? I thought there was something in your bill that said barbed wire was prohibited.
Not that I'm aware of.
You'd be the more vulnerable. I thought there was something under the provision about fencing that said barbed wire.
Our code for large-scale commercial solar, security provisions, each site shall have a minimum of an 8-foot security fence to prevent unauthorized access and vandalism to the commercial solar collectors, and a security program for the site is approved by the planning board. So
I thought it was under the, I'm glad I sit down and see if I can find it. I thought it was under the provisions. Is there a separate section in the code that just deals with fences?
We don't have, that's why I was saying, no, we have no regulations on
I'm
fences in the
probably
town.
confusing this
particular
one.
fence, it's a
Yeah.
no particular fence
Okay,
regulation,
sorry.
but that's what I thought. I knew there was a provision here on
Well,
security
it's
fencing.
gonna be 8 foot instead of 6 foot.
8 foot.
And then, again, we're willing, if the board wants to suggest, recommend barbed wire on those two, sides of the compass, we'd be happy to put that in, be appropriate for that.
We're perfectly fine with this white wire. Just my comment is that in other projects, we have found a lot of opposition from DEC and our report because birds flying through these barbed wires may be injured or killed. So again, it's a balance between human safety and flora and fauna.
So long as the DEC doesn't throw the flag on it, you know, I'm happy to do it. I've not bumped into that particular concern about 3 strands of barbed wire in my career. If you've seen it, it's always something to do with the DEC. What the concern is.
Any other conditions, recommendations to the planning board? Discuss.
So if I can note, when lead agency was coordinated, we did get a response letter back from DEC that didn't object to the planning board serving as lead agency, but did include some comments. You have a copy of that? Yes. So the first comment just notes that a part of the project will go over the state Superfund site. We've noted that, and I think an appropriate condition is subject to certainly any required DEC regulatory approvals. I think those are already in hand, but it's an appropriate condition since it is going over a state listed site. The EC did also identify potential historic or archaeological resources. We'll just note for the record that the applicant did coordinate with the State Historic Preservation Office, and SHPO has signed off on the project. And lastly, DEC identified no specific habitat identified for the parcel, but the northern long-eared bat is found virtually statewide. And on that, the department recommended that any removal of trees greater than 3 inches in diameter of breast height be removed only between November 1st and March 31st. So what it sounds like here in connection with the area variance proposals would be in the opposite direction. The zoning board recommending that no trees be removed, certainly in the northern area of the project site. But I think an appropriate condition, even if it's in the nature of a recommendation of the planning board, is that DEC recommendation of tree removal 3 inches or greater at breast height be limited to those timeframes. And certainly, any action by the board should be subject to planning board actions, especially for the mid-sized note.
So, after considering balance between the benefit to the applicant is weighed against any detriment to the community at large or the neighborhood in particular, would a member offer to grant the requested variance?
Before you do that, can we just review and make clear for the record and for the applicant, any conditions or recommendations we review?
Sure.
Number one
Uh-huh.
would be no removal of trees in the to the north of the panel installation to maintain a buffer
Right.
between the site and Brunswick Meadow.
Right. And the second deals with the more secure fencing.
That, if I could suggest, would be a recommendation to the planning board that that is an appropriate site plan standard. Third would be subject to the DEC regulatory requirements for work in the state superfund site parameter. Recommendation of no tree removal to the planning board as a site plan consideration. 3 inches or greater at breast height, limited to November 1, March 3. And then lastly, certainly subject to action by the planning board on the special use permit site.
And then if this is over, I would also recommend to the planning board to consider more robust screening. In that corner of Brunswick Meadows, so in addition to maintaining the existing tree from, I'm not sure that I'm in a position to say what needs to be put there, but the planning board to make it more robust.
And that would be infill planting or burn.
Is that considered a condition or a recommendation?
That'd be a recommendation that certainly is a site plan, although it's certainly relevant, that's generally the area where the poles will be, but it's certainly a recommendation to the planning board and as a site plan or special use permit condition on the screen.
So we only have like one condition and the rest recommendations.
I think that's correct.
Right, so, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, So noting that we have the one condition and your recommendations to the planning board.
I think I got two conditions.
Oh, okay, good.
No removal of the trees in the area to the north. That is a condition because of that's the area of the poles, which is relevant to your area variance. And planning board action in the special use permit site. And what the planning board may require in terms of infill vegetation or the fencing, building appropriate site plans. So two formal conditions. There'll be no removal of the trees or vegetation north of the project site, between the project site and Brunswick Meadows. And planning board action on the special use permit site.
Would a member like to make a motion to grant the requested variance?
I'll make the motion to grant up to 9 poles, above ground utility poles, with the conditions that we noted.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
No,
Aye.
All opposed? In favor that a variance is granted?
Thank you.
Thank you. Want to continue the work that you're doing with our hardworking building department going forward? Next, we have Atlas Renewables, Brunswick, and Sigway Solar, use variances. And I believe from our last meeting, there was some more data that I think that requested and was going to be provided here.
The previous meeting, it was requested by the zoning board some additional information, especially on East Road, to produce some cross sections and also specifically from one house located at 6 Road Avenue to show that from this house it will not be visible the solar farm. So we have produced the two cross sections. The report was submitted by September 23rd. These cross sections shows specifically from this house that no, the solar farm will not be visible. Additionally, I think that we were really lucky because this house is currently on sales and we extracted from Zillow different pictures. These pictures were taken off-leaf conditions, which are relatively good for supporting our case that even with off-leaf conditions, it will not be possible to receive the solar farm. Also in this, all these pictures are taken from the Zillow website. Our solar farm will be located just behind this, so this is the golf course, and our solar farm will be located just behind this valley. One thing that we would like to remark is that there is a tree line which are evergreen, and we'll keep and we'll maintain these evergreen trees. And we selected different pictures from this house, even inside of the house. Again, I mean, we did not include in the house. These are public pictures on the Zillow. We try to represent from inside the house how this from the living room. They will be looking with the golf balls, but the solar farm will be located in that direction. It will not be visible from this 16 east wall. This is information that we try to recollect. We think that this problem will make sense.
Luis, is there any screening that you have that would show those evergreens on the site?
These are all simulations, and these evergreen trees will be located around here. If you remember, our parcel is like rectangle with a kind of tail. That tail is not used for solar because it's too narrow to install, and this tail is a tail of evergreen trees that will keep enrollment.
Understand, thank you. So John, in particular, you had that question at the last meeting about off-leaf conditions. Does this satisfy the question that you had? It's from this particular vantage point.
Yeah, there were a couple of vantage points that we were concerned with. I think it answers the question, at least for this issue.
We were able to access this location. There were other properties up the road on the right-hand side on East Ave. You couldn't obviously enter the property to see, but I would imagine that when you go further up, now you have a bird's eye view. It's, you know, the angle changes. You know, so I'd be curious to see what that would look like just from that angle. I mean, we were up there on this property here at 16, and we were right on the edge. nobody got hurt for the record, by the way. But, you know, we couldn't figure out exactly where the placement was gonna be, you know, where the equipment is going to be, kind of going down into a little bit like a bowl shape. That's, you know, I'd be curious from that angle, what that would look like.
You want to address that?
Yes. We focused in post 8, we submitted this visual assessment report. We were covering all these points. And as well, this group, if you are concerned about these different areas and this one. We covered from different angles. So these blue arrows correspond to on-site. These yellow arrows corresponds to aerial pictures. We can do this again, specifically for this road.
Yes, I don't know how the numbers go, but from 16 out of the roads, so keeping 16 on the right side of the road, so it's going to be going up.
Correct. So this will be probably 16. One thing that we want to show to the board is that we put some elevations, and we want to emphasize that this elevation 496 versus this elevation 490, this is the elevation of the terrain. This is not considering 490, the elevation of the top of the tree. This is considering the elevation of the terrain. Similar to this 202 versus 216, this 216, it's the elevation of the terrain. So we should consider on top of this 516, on top of this 490, another 30, 40, 50, or 60 feet, which corresponds to the trees. We consider that this is a very well sited location because we got the impression when we visited the site that the neighbors doesn't want to have a long-term build. They want to be isolated. That's why they have kept all these trees around the houses. This is our impression, of course. Maybe there are other reasons, but these are the location 18, these are location 19, these are location 20, these are location 21. It looks to me that it's quite well screened, all this portion.
Yeah, I agree from looking at those.
So we've done a lot of exploration of the visuals, how it would look, being proposed and built out, a lot of simulations of what it would look like. I guess that my next point, and we've been talking about this for months, I'm looking at old minutes from May, that could have met May 16, 2022. And that would be the standard that would be used by the applicant to achieve the use variances. Right, and whether or not you can continue with the Rosenberg standard in this case, if that's for consideration, or if this is going to be considered by the board using the elements for a standard use variance.
Sure. So it continues to be my position that it is bound by the public utility use variance standard. that's what I came in the door with, suggesting that was the appropriate standard for a variety of reasons and put that before the board. And then over the course of the summer, one of the local Supreme Courts in Greene County finally got the case in front of them where someone litigated it and the court prepared, we handed out a detailed case explaining why it is in fact the public utility use variance standard that applies to these solar facilities. And so that is, I believe that is correct. I mean, the flip side of it is if you say, well, okay, why not just the traditional use variance standard? The reality is that case certainly speaks to it. But let's be frank, the use variance standard, if you were to apply the traditional test and go through under your standard, which is the state standard, for each and every use that you can recognize a reasonable return on a piece of property, is something that, it's a very rare day that you can meet that on any particular piece of property, and under any particular set of circumstances to get a use variance if you apply that test as it's intended to apply. And that's the entire reason why there is a public utility use variance standard, is because of the attention and the give and take that's required for public utilities to be located in certain areas. In that case, goes into great detail why it's applicable and that there is a nexus locational aspect to these related to, and that theirs was the exact same sort of proof that we had supplied over the last many months about the distribution grid and the utility substations to in fact bring in a locational component, that it's not a simple case of putting on the zoning map, we're allowing in certain districts and not in others without regard to the location of the interconnection system, because in the case says that a solar field of solar panels with no place to connect is a worthless endeavor. That's why the court recognized that there is a connection between location and the distribution.
I appreciate that. Historically, this board has used the traditional use variance successfully to the applicant's benefit while going through each and every stage of its use. With the current climate now with the housing industry, I mean, if that were to take these parcels out and put the test through the proof of housing development, what that would look like as opposed to what's being proposed for now. So I have a question for our consultant attorney. The applicant wants to use one standard for the use variance, the board's inclined to use another. How is that reconciled?
My recommendation on this would be, there's been no determination by the board on which applicable standard of review is named. Certainly the applicant has presented their position that public utility use variance standard is applicable. And again, the board hasn't made that determination. I think it'd be appropriate for the record, and I think, Ian, you did this earlier, to afford the applicant an opportunity to submit proof on the traditional use variance standards. And if the applicant chooses not to do that, we can confirm that on the record in writing.
Right.
Certainly the applicable legal standard to use will need to be determined at the time you act.
Right.
We're at the stage in the application process where the applicant presumably will take the position their application is complete.
Yeah.
We'll note for the record, it's not complete if using the traditional use variance elements. We've raised that issue, and if the applicant, in terms of addressing their application, will confirm we're not submitting any additional proof. There's no proof to be submitted on the traditional use variance standards. well, then that addresses the issue. The next procedural step would be for the board to consider scheduling a public hearing. Board have any?
So does that, need to be formally determined, and the board to formally determine what, standard they're gonna use, whether they're gonna use the traditional use variance or?
Correct.
Public utility?
But what I would recommend, you do that at the time of determination.
Right.
And if the applicant can confirm no further submissions or no submission will be made on the otherwise applicable use variance standards, then the board can consider moving forward to public hearing and accepting comments from the public.
Is it understanding of the board you feel more comfortable with the traditional variance or?
No, I think what we're saying is there's not been a determination yet about the applicable legal standards. It's understood that there has been a decision by the Greene County Supreme Court. I view that as being not binding on this board. Certainly it's persuasive authority for you to consider, but it's not binding on the board. And again, what applicable review standard? We've certainly heard from the applicant as to its position on what applicable review standard is relevant, and that can be taken under consideration by the board, provide the applicant the opportunity to submit proof under the traditional use variance standards. If they choose to do that, that can be submitted. If they choose not to do that, we can confirm that in writing to the applicant, and then we can move forward to public hearing consideration.
So while the board seems satisfied with the submittals of the visualizations and how it would look, I guess the board would then need the evidence using the traditional use variance and how this would fit.
You should at least allow the applicant the opportunity to submit that proof. And if it chooses not to do so, we can get a written submittal indicating our submission's complete, no further information will be submitted. And the board can determine completeness and move forward to public hearing.
I can't get past, going to Mr. Manelo's comment before, with the last, with the traditional area variance standard about the self-created hardship. But for the fact that you're asking for a project, it's clearly self-created hardship. It's kind of always a little bit of a circular reason because, people, okay, I guess we never have variance, people never ask for them. But when you look at the four criteria for a traditional use variance, where you've got to say for each and every permitted use under the zoning regulations, the applicant can't realize a reasonable return provided the lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence. I just, can't get my head around and say that I think you weren't granting use variances for other solar projects when you said you granted use variances.
That's correct.
So, where, that to me is continues to be a non-starter for solar projects, to say that we're gonna go through for every single use in a residential zone and say, okay, on this 8 acres, you can't put one house, two houses, three houses, and get a reasonable return. I mean, honestly, folks have been coming here a long time. How do you really can't possibly think I can show that? So, that's the kind of the conundrum I have, is and there's a reason why there's the public utility use variance standards for public utilities. It's for these sort of situations, because if you hold this strictly to the 4 prongs of a traditional use variance, they would never make it for any public utilities. So, looking back, I think that the bigger elephant in the room is the town board introduced a moratorium Thursday night for solar, basically pointing to, the best I can tell, my projects that are asking for use variances and possibly other projects, according to the language about not wanting to pay reasonable taxes or pilot payments. And so all of this is kind of, I was kind of hoping to save you a little bit of time tonight. It's kind of all academic, because I like to think I'm a good attorney, but I'm not going to talk the town board out of adopting a moratorium for 12 months. And so, you know, I expect, what's the thing, the third Thursday?
The public hearing, Dave is correct. So the town board did introduce a proposed local law to adopt a 12-month moratorium. We'll call it generically, on large-scale commercial solar. It's on filing, acceptance, review, or determination, action upon those applications. The procedure will be the board does need to conduct a public hearing. That's November 15th. That'll be a special meeting of the town board. They meet on the second Thursday, which this month will be the 10th.
Okay.
And so they're going
It wasn't on the calendar yet when I looked.
Correct. It will be a special meeting of town board on November 15th for public hearing on that proposed moratorium. If adopted by the board, then certainly the way I read that moratorium, it would apply to the continued review of these 2 use variance applications.
But the moratorium itself was focused to, if you read the reasoning behind it, on projects like this that are coming in, basically, the town board's looking at saying you're basically ignoring our zoning law by asking for these projects in zones in which they're not allowed. Then the other prong of that was, and on top of it all, we're not getting enough money for it in a respectful way.
In a respectful way. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
There
that-
are
that's what it is, yeah.
issues concerning
It's,
zoning.
you're not the only,
Yeah,
the only
issues
town,
concerning
right?
economic.
But it's economics, I mean, this pops up all over the place. I'm not suggesting that anyone at the town board is wrong to be addressing these things, but it is very clearly focused on our 2 projects, and maybe there's another one they're asking for use variances, and the town board is looking at going, we said we want you out in the eastern part of the industrial districts, which, yeah, the last one, North Troy, is zoning compliant, but their focus was, we don't like the fact that you're coming in and asking for these in zoning districts where we previously approved. We hit the saturation point with these asks for projects elsewhere. So, you know, my experience tells me, even if I were to come to the public hearing in the town, at the town board on the 15th, and plead my case eloquently and forcefully, or any of those things, they're gonna say, thanks, Dave, and they're still gonna vote that night to adopt the moratorium. You get to see a town board go, well, we ought to think about all your comments, because we think we're gonna get swayed. They'll adopt the moratorium on the 15th, and these 2 projects will be suspended during the review of that process. And so, to me, I can't act like that's not going on in the background, or like I'm going to be here next month. So I really doubt that I will. You know, our intention is, you know, that we're going to proceed with the Troy, North Troy project, which is zoning compliant, which we've got a couple of meetings in front of the planning board, and we're at the cusp. It's been under review for a lot longer, and it's met the threshold. We will seek approval of that, and that one's compliant. These are causing consternation, and we can appreciate that, and we appreciate all the time we spent. I wish we'd gotten to this point, if that's what the town board was concerned about 6, 8, 12 months ago with everybody. It kind of hurt it then, but that's where we are. That's the hand we're dealt. and we'll just participate at the town board level as they review this and try to explain why traditional zoning where you carve up the town into districts and try to plot them on a map doesn't work with it solely where you have to connect to things. And we'll see what that plays out and whether or not we're back in 12 months or not. So I think that's kind of unfortunately where we are. And I don't think, that we'll get to a point of answering that question of which is the appropriate standard anytime soon. So,
Well, the only comment,
it's kind of a.
the comment I had back for Dave
Well, I
was,
guess.
No, Dave, I appreciate the straightforwardness. of
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
So
it is-
the town board will be entertaining that moratorium, and we'll see on the 15th.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of expected people to do about that, but, we're not going to be back next month. So,
I wasn't worried either, but the comment that you made about addressing the four elements, I think that it depends on the parcel by parcel basis and where the zone is and the ask or the use change. So in a B15 versus a B40, those elements could be met in one zone versus another. So I kind of disagree when you say that, if you want to put up a solar farm in any residential zone and you want to change it, you're never going to meet those requirements. I think I disagree because in certain other zones, you could probably show that you can meet those requirements. But to me, I think it's more on a parcel by parcel basis, and I would still like to see those elements presented. That's my opinion. So.
yeah, I guess I struggle when we talk about financial proof that I'm going to get a financial professional to come in and say you can't take that many acres of land off of a road in a residential district and carve it up into 2, 3, or 4 lots and sell them and make money. But to your point, the public utility use variance standard isn't like this all or nothing. You have to give it to people. If you look at what the standard says and what the cases say, it actually involves exactly what you're saying, which is the grant of it is a sliding scale. And, I don't want to belabor it, but it is the showing that needs to be made is related to kind of the impact on the neighborhood. And so where, maybe the one off McChesney is a little bit more in a different area. The one off of Shippey Lane is in a bowl surrounded by trees. And so the showing for that one as to what you're saying is you could have a kind of a case-by-case showing. The public utility use variance standard does speak to, it's not just you have to rubber stamp it because it's a public utility, it's the showing and the balancing of is there an imposition on the community as compared to the benefit to the applicant. So I think we're kind of talking in some sense the same way in the same analysis, but it's the competent financial proof. I mean, I was maybe a little tongue-in-cheek pointing out your comment, but because that one always troubles me. I hear that all the time, but it's the competent financial proof. I don't see, we'll investigate it. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I'm just cynical because I've never seen a use variance I thought people should get. I know we wink and nod if somebody comes in and they need a use variance for a home occupation and we let it slide, but they probably didn't have a report from, an appraiser talking about that this is the only thing they can do in their house. So anyway, kind of water under the bridge for now. We'll be back, I'll be back at some point. We'll take this up again. Again, to be honest, we're pursuing the North Troy site, which I think is deserved after this much time and attention, other approval, being the right district, and with all of the conditions that were imposed. And these other two are causing some stress at the town board level, obviously, along with other projects. And so we'll sit back and we'll go along with that review process from the board to see what they come up with, what sort of questions they have. Because I'm not sure that they've been educated, like this board has been educated about why these asks are being made in those districts as compared to, they put it out by Grafton or put it out, by posting it out in the fields where nobody, hopefully sees it kind of thing. And if it was that easy, trust me, I would have been here for the last 12 months. So I appreciate everyone's attention, and we'll take that up. But I do think your next meeting rolls around, there's going to be a moratorium will be in place, and there'll be no reason to come out and chat.
So it may be appropriate at this point just to adjourn without date.
Hey, why don't we adjourn? Well, why don't we adjourn to the next meeting, subject to the moratorium. If for some reason there's a huge rethink at the town board level, I've yet to experience that on a moratorium. They do this because they're bothered by something. And I'm a town attorney and everything else, where it's, no hard feelings. They need to wrestle with things that are bothering them, and a moratorium's how they do it. And I get to see a good person come in and sway a town board that, hey, you're wrong about a moratorium. It's not gonna happen. So that's the way the world will live. So, but thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the fall, and we'll be back at some point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other issues for discussion, topics of new business? I make a motion to adjourn today's meeting with November 2nd, please.
One second.
Thanks, Patricia. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night.
November 7th, we'll do a public hearing for
Yeah.
fund.
Right.
And right now, November 21, it's only